in comparison, in 2018, 44% have, and we're even outperforming 2020 by almost 2 full percentage points. And if you go down into some of our critical swing states, Georgia, 830,000 people have voted, 52.3% Dems. Compare that to 2020, where only 48% were Democrats, and we know what happened in that race. Michigan is another one, 645,000 votes cast. Dems account for almost 53% of the total vote. In 2020, we were only at 41%. Pennsylvania, 489,000 votes cast. 73.3% are Democrats, which is probably why you're seeing Donald Trump and the Republicans freaking out today. And in 2020, it was at 68%. So we're overperforming by 5%. And North Carolina, it's pretty much equal. And really not enough numbers back for like Nevada. I'm hoping my computer will come back up, and I will drop the link in where you guys can go and play on all of this. This is on what modeled party. So this is basically what Target Smart uses. Anybody's worked on any campaigns, when you're building your list and you're doing it on a Dem propensity score, this is what this is all modeled off of. And so for anybody saying that we can't win, every poll is so different that the only poll that matters is who votes by November 8th. So, and I very rarely agree with Michael Moore, but he was right in 2016, and he's predicting a major Democratic sweep. So I think the computer came back up. Yay! Sorry, so excited.
I know. Even in Tennessee, we saw, lines in the polling places, which is not usual for us here. And we had, I think, 2 new voters just in the time that I was there voting. And they were both young women, and because they recognized people who are first-time voters at the polls here, so it's very interesting.
And and if in case you guys missed, Mike Lee's performance last week on Fox, Ruby Red, Utah, Mike Lee went on twice last week. First on Tucker Carlson, begging Mitt Romney to support him and send money. And then later in the same week on Sean Hannity going, please, I need your viewers to fund me. We're losing. So if that tells you anything, you have Mike Lee in Ruby Red, Utah, begging for money on Fox News. And, it looks like there's a very good shot to flip the Arkansas governor's seat.
All right. Did you have any data on Ohio? Somebody's asking, Jamie.
Yes, in a minute.
Yep. Yep, the Iowa Senate race is getting very interesting. Yeah, Jamie's gonna look up Ohio.
I will give you guys the link. This is put on by Target Smart. It is actually a super easy to use. Just like overall Senate races in which Ohio and Iowa are included in. There's been 3,850,000 votes, 52% Dem. In 2018, that was 43%. And in 2020, it was 51. So 1% more on Democrats, which, 1%, oh, that doesn't sound like a lot, except elections are won and lost by less than 1%. And governor's races, it's even over 4 million votes have been cast, 53.3% Dem. 2020, it was only 50. So people are fired up.
I think I have the link, so I will drop that into the chat. But now, don't just leave us. Oh yeah, Heidi did as well. But don't leave us, because we've got a lot of good stuff. You can play with that after the show tonight.
When that came out, I may have sent a text to some people saying how excited I was, and they may have replied with peak emojis.
Yes, definitely, because she was overly excited.
But when you look at the numbers, but we've got some great messaging guidance for the last couple of weeks. And Lori, I'm going to have you do intros.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah,
I don't have my Google Doc up.
So tonight we have some really great guests with us, and we're going to be talking. Actually, they're going to be talking because they're the experts. This is from Americans with if I can say it, Americans for Tax Fairness. On economic messaging, and we definitely have seen an upturn in people rating the economy as and inflation as really what's kind of crept back up to the top of a lot of people's voting list and issue list, and certainly abortion rights and health and that sort of thing is still driving a lot of people out. But most people vote with their pocketbook. It's how good is my family at being able to pay our bills and making sure that we're safe. So because that's such a hot button issue, we are thrilled to have Frank Clementi, who is the executive director and helped found Americans for Tax Fairness in 2012, and has been leading the fight to make the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share so we can make huge investments in working families. And also tonight with Frank is Andrea Haverdink, who is the digital director for Americans for Tax Fairness, and she organizes online to connect taxing the wealthy and corporations to pull that across and to make sure we understand that how that is tied to all of our progressive priorities and how we mobilize around this issue. So right now we're not really trying to convince as many people who they should vote for, but just to get out and vote. And the more we can have them understand that this truly is connected to their pocketbook will make a lot of sense. So I'm going to turn it over now to Frank and Andrea.
Thanks so much, Lori. I appreciate you folks having us on here. I didn't, as you were talking, I was thinking about you guys are really about democracy. And we've been doing a ton of work on billionaires buying elections. So at some point, maybe we could do some collaborating about that. We're very afraid about how much more every election cycle billionaires are spending, and they're creating these single candidate super PACs to just get the Herschel Walker elected, or the JD Vance, or the Masters in Arizona. It's really getting scary to me. So anyway, we've got a lot to do together on that. I'm gonna, folks don't mind, because kind of this topic is a bit data driven, and I'm gonna share some polling with folks. I'm gonna share a PowerPoint. Oops, I need it's disabled for screen sharing. So who's ever in charge, if you could let me share.
if you just make him a co-host, that will allow it.
There you go. Okay. I'm going to cover. Oops. Actually, let me play it from the beginning. Okay, so this is from our Americans for Tax Fairness Action Fund, our C4. So as Lori was saying at the beginning, the economy is really a top issue on voters' minds right now. Most polls are showing that it's really what is mattering to working families. The New York Times poll, which has gotten a lot of play recently, they saw a dramatic increase from the previous poll they'd done in terms of people saying how much the economy and inflation. I'm using economy, inflation, sort of some polls separate the two things out. Some polls treat it as one, but it's 44% of respondents said this is like the top issue and it's far above the other issues. Nearly 4 in 10 women, so almost the same number of women said it was really a top priority for them. Surprisingly, only 9% said abortion rights was their top issue. And then among independents, key swing voters, as we all know, especially non-educated independents, they chose economic issues as their main concern, far above any other issue. So from our point of view, and we've been beating this drum, we're going to put a report out tomorrow on this stuff. It's critical that progressives spend the next 2 weeks really explaining this to voters, explaining what this Congress has achieved for them in terms of lower prescription drug costs, lower energy costs, more people getting health insurance, et cetera, and that it's paid for. It's very critical with independent voters to be able to say, hey, this is paid for. Big corporations are going to pay a fair share of taxes. We're going to go after rich and corporate tax chiefs to make them pay the money that they owe. And so we have strong messages from this poll that we're going to show you. Before we do that, so we are putting a report out tomorrow or Wednesday on the TV ad war battle in battleground states and congressional districts. I saw the people signing in, saying the states they're from. There's a lot of folks on the call tonight, either from battleground states or from states that have congressional battleground swing congressional districts. We were able to look at 275 ads compiled that were ran from September to October, so less than 2 months of ads. More than half, 56%, were about the economy, inflation, government spending, taxes, and the IRS. They don't talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. They just talk about those issues because most people don't know what the Inflation Reduction Act is. The disappointing number was that 82% of those ads were run by congressional super PACs, GOP congressional super PACs. They are zoned in very much on the economic message, on the inflation message, on the claiming that Democrats have, and from a negative point of view, claiming that Democrats have raised taxes on people making less than $75,000. They've engaged in all the spending. It's wasteful, and they've got 87,000 IRS agents after you. We've got to do our best to try and counter that. The Democratic super PACs, they're only running about 11%. About 11% of the economy, as we saw, were from the Democratic side, on the super PAC side. So surprisingly, candidates aren't running economy ads almost at all. So I'm not quite sure why that is. And remember, the super PACs, for the Republicans, they attack Democratic candidates. For the Democrats, they attack Republican candidates. They're the attack dog in this thing. They drive up the negatives, et cetera. So I'm going to just run through this slideshow on the poll that we did in September. It was done by Impact Research. They are run, their top partner is John Anzalone. He is Biden's top pollster, both for when he ran for president and since he's been president. He's done some polls for us too. So one of the questions we asked is,
Frank, if I can jump in, it looks like you're stuck on slide 1. You might want to try to restart that PowerPoint.
This keeps happening on my slideshow, and I have no idea why. Andrea, you want to try and load it and see what's, I mean, you can't see this slide that says economy top issue on voters' minds?
Nope, we're stuck on the first slide.
This keeps happening.
If I can be a co-host, I'm happy to try sharing it. There we go.
Sorry, just to show you we can share this PowerPoint with you, but we got this. Go ahead, Andrew. Are you doing it, Andrea?
Yep. Trying to find the right slide here.
You may have to stop sharing, Frank.
There we go.
Now,
Can folks see the full slide
you can?
and they can see it advancing?
Yes.
Great. All right. Frank, is this the
Go for it.
slide?
Yeah. So let me just clear this here. You're showing the Google thing, not the PowerPoint.
This is how it opens for me.
Okay. So we had one question, just asking people, giving them a description about the Inflation Reduction Act. It lowers Medicare, gives power to negotiate drug prices, caps seniors out-of-pocket drug costs. It's over here. Will lower health insurance premiums for people who buy insurance. It also invests in increasing the production of clean energy to combat climate change and reduces the federal budget deficit. What you see here, and you can't really see it because this is not, it's not in PowerPoint, 70% overall support the bill, 37% strongly support, not the bill, the law, the provisions of the law, 25% were against it. And these are likely voters, poll of likely voters. It's 1,200 sample, oversample of independent voters. We want to get a sense of voters, independent voters in swing states, or more the profile of voters in swing states, more and congressional districts, more swing voters. So we did a big oversample of independents. This is the Democratic column here. This is the independent column. You can see the independent voters are roughly about the same as the top line number. The intensity number, the strength of their support is 29%, whereas the overall sample is 37%, so not quite as good. We almost have 47% support for Republicans. This is just on the goodies, the spending, the investment side of the Inflation Reduction Act. Next slide. So over here in this green box, we wanted to now run this separately as okay, what happens if you tell people how you're going to pay for it? And the three big ways are the 15% minimum tax on billion-dollar corporations, a 1% tax on corporate stock buybacks, and strengthening IRS enforcement to crack down on tax cheating by the wealthy and corporations. So this first column is the previous test on telling them about the goodies. This column is this question here, how it's paid for. You can see the top line number is the same, but the intensity number, the strong support, goes to 42%, 5 percentage points above the 37%. So people like that it's paid for. If you go over here to the independents, you see it's an even bigger bump. Same rough number, 67, 68 overall between the first question about the goodies and now this question about taxes. But the strong number goes up 7 percentage points from 29 to 36%. So having this tax component in here is very strong. This is a very solid number with independent voters. It's a winning message with independent voters. Next slide. So we tested 8 different messages. This first slide shows the ones that tested the best. And really the top one is the prescription drug message that just all alone prescription drugs tested best. And we're looking here at the overall number and also the independent number in particular. Then equally strong was the inflation message. This is dealing with inflation. It's lowering your costs. It's giving people, 13 million people, health insurance, reducing household energy costs, and reducing the deficit. 51% there, 53% independent, and then reducing costs, and it's paid for. It'll give you lower prescription drug prices, healthcare premiums, energy costs will get reduced, but it's paid for by billion-dollar corporations, cracking down on wealthy tax cheats and preventing price gouging by drug companies. 48%, 51% independent. So these 3 messages are very solid. The prescription drug is best, it was this bracketed number is the best overall message, chosen as the number one message. But we have very strong messages with costs and inflation and paid for, which is what people like to hear. We tested some other messages. Honestly, the energy messages don't test as well. Voters just are much less interested in the energy stuff. I hate to say, clean energy or saving the environment. Next slide. So we took the three attacks that Republicans, the GOP is making against the components of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's not necessarily the act itself. They don't even talk about the act. They just say, here are the three things: inflation, raising your taxes, and IRS. So this red box is the inflation attack message from Republicans. It doesn't do anything to address inflation, which is a 40-year high. This is reckless. It's a $750 billion government spending spree that will make inflation worse. And a lot of the public is primed to be told more government spending equals more inflation. We ran, I think it was 5 different messages responding to that Republican attack. The best message is the paid for response message. Democrats say that the law is more than fully paid for. In fact, it will reduce the deficit by $300 billion. It does this by making billion-dollar corporations pay a fair share, taxes by cracking down on wealthy and corporate tax cheats, and by preventing price gouging by drug corporations. It won't raise taxes on anyone making under $400,000. That does better than saying the good things that it does. It allows Medicare to negotiate drug prices, reduces energy costs, et cetera. So this is a very strong message. As you can see here, we're beating, with likely voters overall, we beat them 51 to 37%. That's a 14-point margin. With independents, it goes to a 20 percentage point margin. That's a big gap in our favor by saying this where people are being attacked. This is all paid for. Next slide. So then we give the Republican tax attack. Republicans say this reckless law is a hike on working families. Tax hike on working families includes $500 billion of new taxes, most of which will be paid by middle and lower income people and small businesses. With our economy already facing a recession, the American people cannot afford the higher taxes from this law. Similar to the $75,000, people making under $75,000 will be paying a lot more taxes, et cetera. Again, the same response that was given for the inflation attack is the best response on the paid for, is the best response on the taxes attack. So we know we have a really good message. 52-38 is the overall. This is a poll of likely voters, so we're beating them by 14 percentage points on that. Then on independents, we're almost beating them by the same 20% margin, 53-35 here. The Democratic message beats the Republican message. So very strong numbers for us. Next slide. Lastly, these ads we've been keeping track of, probably in half the states, more than half the Senate races and more than half the congressional races, it's this attack on the IRS. 87,000 new auditors are coming after the middle class and small businesses. We tested a bunch of responses to that claim. And this one was the overall one: improve the IRS. Democrats say by restoring IRS staffing levels to where they were before, deeper public and budget cuts, this law will make the IRS work better for taxpayers. That means shorter waits to get tax refunds and questions answered, and catching more wealthy and corporate tax cheats. We tested this. We tested all these messages in a bunch of other ways. We don't have time to go through it. One-liners. Here's our one-liners, and this. We know that this catching more wealthy and corporate tax cheats is a big winner. Here, again, a similar margin with all the voters, 52-39, the Democratic message wins. With independents, not quite 20 percentage points, it's 16 percentage points, 51-35. Still, we're up above 50%, really good margins. And next slide. So, condensed in the slide are the top 3 messages, which I assume, Lori, we can send this slide deck around to folks afterwards. We actually have Andrea, maybe you could, when we finish on the slideshow, we could drop into the chat our talking points that we developed the 2-pager off of the inflation off this poll with some very nice talking points that incorporate all the stuff, give a lot more. If you're writing op-eds, if you're writing email messages, you're doing social media, there's a lot of rich language in there, which we can drop in. Anyway, this gives the overall core message. Dem passes critical legislation to help reduce inflation by allowing Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices, lowering healthcare premiums by an average of $800 for 13 million people, capping out-of-pocket prescription drugs and the cost of insulin. You can add in here and lowering home energy costs. Is fully paid for by cracking down and fighting, protecting us from climate change. Is fully paid for by cracking down on wealthy and corporate tax cheats and by making billion-dollar corporations pay a fair share of taxes, and will not raise taxes on anyone making under $400,000 on small businesses. This is the response I showed you about spending inflation taxes, and this is the response on the IRS. Last slide. Okay, we want to play this. This is Chris Van Hollen, Blue State, running, who we work with a lot on tax issues. He is the best ad I've seen that essentially incorporates the messaging we just gave. He actually doesn't address the IRS stuff. He stays focused on corporate taxes, but I'd like to play this for you. Hey, Andrea, we can't hear it.
Big money special. I don't know about you, but I get pretty steamed when big money special interests get their way at our expense. That's why we're fighting back. We stood up to big pharma, and now we're cutting prescription drug prices. We took on big oil, and now we'll produce more clean energy and lower your costs. We won our fight to make the richest corporations pay more of their fair share in taxes. I'm Chris Van Hollen, and I approve this message because I'll take on any fight to make things better for all Marylanders.
It's such a good message because he's defending and talking about how important his vote was in terms of lowering people's costs, in this case on prescription drugs, which, as we saw, is the best testing message, on clean energy, and then it pivots to and how it's paid for. It's paid for by taxing big corporations. People love the fact that this stuff is paid for. They love the fact that you're taxing big corporations, and he just kind of he does the best job of any candidate I've seen putting this message out in a 30-second ad for his voters. Next slide. He and us, we got President Biden to take it up. Biden changed it a little bit, called it the billionaire minimum income tax, but he's really behind this. He put it into his budget this year. And then we've got a couple of members of the House from Tennessee, Lori, Representative Cohen, Steve Cohen, and from Virginia, Representative Don Beyer. They've taken the bill. They've made it, they got the approval from the White House on the bill. And so this is what, it's a great bill. We've got about 50 co-sponsors on it, and would love your help to build support for that post-election. But anyway, it's got a very, we kind of think that, voters don't just they don't always want to hear what you've done. They also want to hear what you're going to do. And we know that a lot was left on the table in this tax fight and in the fight over Build Back Better. A lot of, whether it's childcare, housing, or education funding, or the care economy, or helping pay for college. A lot of that was left on the table, and all the tax stuff was left on the table that pays for all that, which is what Biden had proposed. And so we think that people that are politicking now ought to be saying, here's what we've done, and here's what we're going to do in the future. And the billionaire's income tax is a great component to that, because as this poll shows, 74% of the population overall supports it, 47% strongly. Almost all Democrats, as you can see, 2/3 of Democrats, this is the 68%, the dark gold column here, support it. Independents, 72% of independents support it, and even 55% of Republicans support it. So it's a very strong proposal. Basically what it says is that if you're somebody making over $100 million, somebody who has wealth of $100 million or more, that you are going to pay at least a 20% tax rate up front, right from the beginning every year. And that tax is going to be paid on your, not just on what you income, the income you earn, but on the value of your investments. So people may recall, Americans for Tax Fairness put out reports during the pandemic showing how much billionaire wealth had gone up. It went up $2 trillion. It went up 70% over the first 2 years of the pandemic. None of that money was being taxed. It's only taxed when it is sold. When somebody sells it, then they have to pay capital gains tax on it, which is a 20% tax rate rather than the full rate of 37%. This proposal says you have to pay at least 20% every year on all of you, not just on your income, but also on your wealth gain that occurs from your investments every year. And then when you settle those investments, you're going to settle up with us, and whatever they were worth, if there's adjustments needed, higher tax rate needed, et cetera, you're going to pay that. And so it's a great proposal. It brings in almost $400 billion over 10 years, which you can do a lot with. And the public, we don't explain all those details to the public. It's too complicated. Just the bottom line: do you support this tax on people making $100 million, with households worth more than $100 million, a 20% tax? And 3/4 say yes. And we've done poll testing on this lots of times before, and it's always quite consistent. Next slide. We also split our sample of 1,200 voters. Because we wanted to see, we composed what would be a typical pitch that a candidate this cycle would be making to voters. And we wanted to add in the billionaire income tax as part of the pitch. So half of the sample did the pitch that's in white, it's not colored yellow, which is to help Americans keep up with rising costs. We passed legislation that allows Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices, and it brings the manufacturing of supply chains back to the United States. Now we need to pass legislation that bans members of Congress from trading individual stocks. It's kind of a common refrain. Those are kind of components that candidates are using right now. The second half of the sample, we said, not only do we want to ban members of Congress from trading individual stocks, we also want to pass a billionaire income tax that makes them pay their fair share by requiring those worth more than $100 million to pay an income tax rate of at least 20%. And what you see here on the left-hand side, the overall number was the same for these likely voters, virtually the same, 47% like the first version of this without the billionaire's income tax, 46% liked it with the billionaire's income tax. Where you get this huge change is in the middle. We see independent voters. It goes from 41% with the original question to 49%, so an 8 percentage point jump. That's a 20% jump in the sample in support for this different way of talking about it, different way of saying what you're going to do next. And then look at this non-college independent voters. These are, working class people, didn't go to college, of all races. They went up 18 percentage points. Huge increase to more than 53%. So just a real big good showing that people like to hear they're going to tax the rich, going to tax corporations, and they like the fact that stuff is paid for, especially a lot of men. That's always a big question for them: are you paying for it or not? They're more deficit sensitive, so to speak, than women tend to be. Women tend to be more human. What are you doing with the money? I hope you're doing stuff that's going to matter to my family more so than men are. So anyway, I think that's it. And we summarize the billionaire income tax message. Congress can do even more to help Americans keep up with rising costs that many of us struggle, even more than having passed the Inflation Reduction Act. Congress needs to pass a billionaire income tax, and this is what it does. You and I pay taxes every year on our wages. Billionaires need to do the same, pay taxes as their assets grow in value. It's another way of saying as their wealth grows in value. And then lastly, a billionaire's income tax will raise lots of revenue needed to make necessities affordable for seniors and working families, whether it's childcare, housing, college, paid leave. It can be used to strengthen Social Security and Medicare. It can be used to fund the child tax credit and other services that support working families. So that's kind of our pitch on the billionaire minimum income tax. Any questions? Or do we have time for questions, Lori?
I think we do. I think
Yeah, I think we have about 5 minutes, and then Congressman Khanna will be joining. So
Peggy has a question. Frank, it said that I think the question's on the billionaire tax. So she's asking families worth less than 100 million wouldn't have to worry about having their stocks taxed at a higher rate.
Well, the billionaire's income tax isn't necessarily taxing their stock at a higher rate. What it's doing is it keeps the current rates in place. What it's doing is making them prepay. So essentially, it's counting the growth. It's like Elon Musk, right? If his stock, Tesla stock, whatever, his wealth went up, $100 billion, $100 billion, I think it was during actually more than that. He went from, well, whatever. We're saying, okay, you're going to pay taxes on that wealth growth. Whereas right now you don't have to, you don't pay taxes on it until you sell it, but you may never sell it. You may just pass it on to your heirs, and your heirs get it at that higher tax value, at the higher, at what it's worth. Then all that value, increased value of your stock that you started, Elon, maybe it's your IPOs. It's when at $10 a share, it's now worth whatever it's worth. All the increased wealth or increased value in that stock disappears for tax purposes under the current system. So we're saying we're going to put in place a billionaire's tax that taxes that wealth growth as you go along every single year, just like the rest of us are paying taxes every single year. It's not the full amount. The full amount will be figured out once you finally sell it, and we know what the value is. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. All right, let's see if we have one more question here. I guess Peggy's still following up. If you're worth less than 100 million, this doesn't affect you.
Right. There's a whole lot more tax reform we need to do.
Right.
To tax people who are worth less than $100 million. Just to put in context, the Inflation Reduction. So when in the 2020 campaign, Senator Warren, Senator Sanders, they put forward $10 trillion in investments, and that was all paid for by progressive taxes. That doesn't count their Medicare for all plans, $10 trillion. Biden proposed $4 trillion in the campaign, which is a big deal. Then when he became president, in March, 2 months after he was president, he put forward a package that was $3.5 trillion. He took out about a 700 billion or so for infrastructure, trying to cut a bipartisan deal, but he kept the rest intact, $3.5 trillion. Big deal. The House passed in November 2021 a $2 trillion package. Manchin and Sinema shrunk it down to this past August to a $500 billion package. So we have $3 trillion that President Biden has put on the table that we can come back to do all these, to fund all these great things. So there's a lot of tax reform.
Yeah, awesome.
I also want to make sure that Andrea has a minute or two to just talk about something we've got, the big social storm we've got going tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll keep it super quick. We've been really lucky to work with DemCast and a bunch of other amazing groups, members of Congress. Everybody that could have a stake in getting the economic messaging out there is kind of joining in tomorrow to use this toolkit based on all this awesome messaging in the polling that we were able to take out. So if you look in the chat, I have that toolkit there. DemCast was nice enough to turn it into a Speechify kit for those of you who really like to use Speechify. And then if you want to keep up with us, we can get you an email, we can get you in our social media. There's links there so you can connect with us. But we really encourage everyone to be using this toolkit tomorrow during the big social push. But farther beyond as well. Use it to your heart's content. We need to get this message out there. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, we at DemCast know all about our toolkits, so.
And they actually have some great candidate graphics in there as well, on what candidates have said about taxing billionaires and corporations. And so I always think that really kind of hits home. And there's some great graphics comparing Republican policy to Democratic policy.
Awesome. Jamie, do you know how to let people save the chat? I don't see any options to do that here.
I don't either, because I see a save the chat option. So what we can do at the end is save it and hurry and throw it into a Word doc and then put it in the Word doc at the very end for you. So you have all the links.
Yes.
But I actually just even Googled it and can't find where they're telling me I'm supposed to.
It's probably a setting on Zoom, so we'll figure that out before the next meeting. But we're happy to make sure that when we send out the slideshow from tonight, that we can include the pertinent links and things from the chat. We can definitely do that. All right. Well, do we have the congressman with us yet?
Not quite. They always seem to be a minute or two late. You ever notice
It's
that?
like they're busy or something.
I know. It's like they
running
have,
the
they have other
country.
stuff to do. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So he's gonna round us out tonight. But I mean, while we're waiting, let's now I'm curious about Ohio. So there have been 365,000 votes in Ohio and 44.3% are Democrat. In 2018, it was 40%, and 2020, it was 41%. So that is 2.5 points higher than 2020. So, and better than 2018 when the last Democrat in Ohio kept his seat. So
it sounds so permanent, the last Democrat in Ohio.
well, he's still in. So I doubt there's any early voting number from the first day of Texas, but I will be actually, there is some early voting numbers already. 127,000 votes cast in Texas with 47.7% Democrat and 43.3% Republican. So
in the chat, it's been mentioned that they've been apparently the GOP has been encouraging people to hold their mail-in votes until election day. And you know, we can't control that, but we can just encourage people to get out and vote. And I think that the messaging that Frank and Andrea have shared tonight have made it very clear who's on the side of the working family. And I think it's really critical that we make people understand that you know, Biden does not have a magic wand to wave at a gas pump to make the gas prices go down. If you look at inflation worldwide, we have the lowest inflation of pretty much any first world country. Some are into the 20% inflation. And so, you know,
Turkey's an 80. So,
yeah. So, you know, that it's really critical that we understand that we're doing what we can to modify the impact of inflation. with the Inflation Reduction Act. A lot of those things won't really have an appreciable effect on inflation. It's a slow build, but it will have an overall effect, over the next several years. So, and the GOP answer to inflation is what? Yeah, blame the Democrats. And if they're blaming anybody, it should be Trump, because he's the one that put us in this process with the 2017 tax cuts. So it's really important for us to draw that line between what the rest of the world is doing and what we're doing. There's no magic pill here, but we're the only ones actually doing something. The other side has no hint. In fact, as far as I can tell, the only thing that they want to do is hold the U.S. hostage so that they can pare back Medicare and Social Security. And they've already announced that's their plan next year if they regain the House. So it's really so critical for so many reasons that we maintain control of the House and the Senate going forward. And so has Florida started early voting yet, Jamie?
I just saw that and I'm looking. So far, 1,167,000 votes have been cast. 49.4% Democrat, 44.7% Republican. And compare that to 2020, it was 53% Dem, 39% Republican. So Republicans are actually voting a little bit more so far in Florida than they did in 2020. But we're still ahead. So, but 2018, that was reversed. 43% of Democrats had voted and 52% of Republicans. So.
And nobody can watch these numbers any better than Jamie Carter. So I think it's her guilty pleasure.
Virginia has almost tripled 2018 early vote totals. 373,000 people have voted, 56% Democrat. And in 2018, it was 52, 2020, it was 53. So.
All right.
And only 29% of Republicans have voted so far.
Welcome, Congressman. We're so happy to see you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Everyone's been anxious for you to join.
Well, I was at the Volley at the White House, so we just got back, and
nice.
It's wonderful to be on. Is everyone on? Should I just start?
Everyone's on. Let me introduce you in case anyone does not know who you are. But Congressman Khanna is proud to serve as a representative for California's 17th District. He is the chairman of the House Oversight Subcommittee on the Environment. And so, and in that role, he has held public utilities and polluters accountable for their actions. He held the very first congressional hearing with the leaders of Big Oil under sworn testimony to put a stop to climate disinformation. Yay. And Congressman Khanna has worked across the aisle while remaining committed to progressive principles and policies that help ensure a more prosperous economy for everyone. So with that, I will turn it over to the Congressman.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for what you're doing in these 2 critical weeks heading up to the election. I know how active you are, how strong your voices are. I penned an op-ed in the Boston Globe called Economic Patriotism and Needing a New Economic Patriotism. And tonight, I just want to share a few thoughts about how we need to be more aggressively messaging on the economy. It is totally wrong for the Republicans to have any advantage on us on the economy. And yet I'm seeing these polls, which are the Republicans up 10, 15 points on the economy. We're up when it comes to reproductive rights as human rights by 40 points in these polls. We're up when it comes to preserving democracy. But somehow voters are leaning towards Republicans on the economy. The first thing we need to point out is the Republicans are running on Trussonomics. They're basically running on tax cuts for rich corporations, rich, wealthy individuals. This is what McCarthy is saying. He wants to extend the Trump tax cuts. Well, they tried that just 6 weeks ago in Great Britain, and they almost literally destroyed the British economy. Liz Truss had to resign over it. And the Republicans want to bring that tax cut policy, and they're claiming that's going to solve inflation. Give me a break. If they got their wish, that would make inflation soar. We'd have the same destruction of our economy that we saw in Great Britain that happened there. So we need to point out that the Republican plan of cutting Social Security benefits, which is Rick Scott, of trying to have tax cuts for the wealthy, is not going to do anything for people's price on gas. It's not going to do anything for the price on food. It's not going to do anything to actually make people's lives better and tackle inflation. What will? What will is what this president has been doing. According to the CBS poll, 63% of people blame inflation primarily on us not having enough manufacturing here and not having supply chains here. And that's obvious. We didn't make enough baby formula in America. We didn't make enough masks in America. We don't have semiconductor chips in America, making the costs higher for our goods. One of the things that the Democratic Party believes in is bringing our reshoring home, bringing manufacturing home. This is what this president has done. $20 billion Intel is putting in Ohio. More money in Ohio under this president and Intel, and I led the CHIPS Act, which led to that with Senator Schumer, more money than Trump got in his 4 years for any state in middle America. 7,000 manufacturing jobs. How are we not having every person in America realize what this president has done? 350,000 manufacturing jobs back in America. The infrastructure bill, creating jobs for people not with college degrees in factory towns in rural America and Black America. And that is the solution to bring down inflation. Then people say, well, Ro, why is inflation not coming down? You can't have 40 years of offshoring policy where we got rid, because of neoliberalism, of our productive base, starting with Ronald Reagan, and expect in 1 year that the president's going to solve that problem. Of course he can't do it in 1 year. But what he can do is continue to work on what we've done for the past year and build on it to reverse 40 years of offshoring our production. We can start by bringing our manufacturing home. We already are. We can start by actually giving working class families a raise and encouraging organizing and worker organizing so that workers are paid with dignity. We can put money in the pockets of our working families, which is what the child tax credit was. It was putting $600 in the pockets of working families. And we can hold big corporations accountable. I have been proposing with Sheldon Whitehouse a tax on big oil, windfall profits tax. I mean, give me a break on this war on energy. They're making $23 billion of profits, Exxon is. If it's a war on energy, it's an awfully failed war because they're doing very, very well. And they're willing to pay a windfall profits tax in Europe. Shell says, oh, we understand Europeans are suffering. We're fine paying the 20% tax. But the fact of the matter is that they're still not willing to pay the tax here. We need to say that the Democrats are for going after these awful windfall profits that these companies are making and holding them accountable to pay the tax here so that Americans can get some relief at the pump. What would the Republican plan be? They'd just add to the record oil and gas profits and provide them with more subsidies so they can have more profits for their shareholders. We're the party that's going to end the price profiteering of these corporations. So this is the absolute key to our economic message and economic choice, that we are the party that is for economic patriotism, bringing jobs to places left out, bringing all our production home, having public-private partnerships, basically what built America, Hamilton's vision, FDR's vision, and they're the party that's going to continue what started in the Reagan Revolution, tax cuts for corporations who, because of corporate greed, shipped the jobs to where there was the cheapest labor and lowest environmental standards, hollowed out our middle class, deindustrialized this country, and this president, our party, is now rebuilding it. We're claiming the economy back, and that's what's going to lower inflation. we've got to get on the playing field and make the economic case. And there are things you may have better ways of putting it than I just did, but I know our policies are correct on this. I know we're helping working families and the middle class. I know we're rebuilding, and it just pains me that the Republicans are somehow winning on the economy issue. So my pitch to you, my appeal to you all is for these next 2 weeks, let's make the economic case. Let's talk about the president's record. And we're not saying, oh, that means that everything is fine. We're saying we're trying to reverse something that has been a problem for many, many years. And then let's talk about what we're going to do once we have the House again and the Senate again, that we're going to continue to bring this manufacturing back. We're going to hold the big oil companies accountable to get profits back in the pockets of ordinary Americans. We're going to have another tax credit for working families so that they can make ends meet. We're going to increase Social Security benefits instead of cutting them so our seniors will be able to make ends meet. We're going to continue to lower the cost of healthcare and education by making community college and four-year public education free, by continuing to give relief on student loans. I believe we can win and should win the economic argument. And that really was my appeal. And I appreciate your giving me sort of the closing 10 minutes. I'm happy to take questions if you have any, but I just wanted to make that case. And I lay it all out in this Boston Globe op-ed called A New Economic Patriotism.
Yeah,
We'll make sure we find that link for everybody too.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I think you just gave us our marching orders for the next 2 weeks, and that was pretty clear, painting a pretty clear picture in a very short period of time, explaining exactly what the Democrats have done to try to right this ship economically for the country. And, you know, you can't turn the Titanic around.
That's a good way of putting it. Well, you guys are so influential. I mean, you know that. You're one of the most, look, today's Diwali. It's a holy day for Indian Hindus. And I was just at the White House with the president. I ordinarily wouldn't do a call on this day, but I said, DemCast, I know how much you guys matter and your voice matters. And we need you out there on the economic battlefield. I'll just say this, look, the consultants, they look at it, they say we're 40% up on reproductive choice. Let's run on abortion. Of course we should run on abortion. And they say, let's run on democracy. Of course we should. And then they say, we're down on the economy. Let's not talk about the economy. That's just a mistake because we have the record to talk about the economy. And it's not either or. I say, when people ask me, I say, of course, the first bill we should do is codify Roe versus Wade. That should be our first bill. Second bill should be voting rights. But bills 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 should be about the economy. And we should talk about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other side doesn't have any plan to fix it except to put more money back into the billionaires and the corporations. So
exactly,
there's nothing there for the working families at all. So, and I think you've made a wonderful case for that tonight. All right.
Thank you.
So we've got somebody asking if there will be a clip on Congressman's speech. We'll be glad to clip that. Because
I would have dressed up better if I knew it would be clipped, but all right.
Hey, you know what? It's real talk though.
Yeah, that's
thank you.
That's what we needed is real talk. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
us.
Thank you for having me.
Giving us our marching orders. Our time is over. So we will see you next time, and we will email you out the clips for all of this. Thanks, guys.
perfect ending. Thank you so much.